And we are live. Junk Shop will be right back. Time got away from us for a second. So I'm just gonna say hi to everybody in the chats. Hey, Amiga Nuts, how you doing, man? Let's see who else is here. Oh, Dave. Hey, Dave. Always happy to see you. All right. So today or tonight for us, good morning, good evening, good really early morning, wherever you are. Uh, Junk Shop and I are going to take a look at the Yellow Wallpaper, which is such a great short story. It's practically a novella. It's about 50 pages long, roughly. It's free on the internet. You can look at it on your phone. Hey, Paul Camish. So we're going to take a look at the Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Yeah, that's a lot of names. And I did not have a chance. I meant to. I didn't have a chance to peruse information about her in particular. I'm assuming that she married more than once. So that's probably where the extra names come in. Perkins may or may not have been a family name. I don't know. I need to look that up. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Yellow Wallpaper. And this is a great short story from the 19th century um, that uh, really gives a close, uncomfortably close look into how mental illness was treated in the 19th century, and particularly how mental illness in women was treated. Um, and there's a lot of very interesting things in this story. So we're gonna try and break it down into some specific chunks, and you're going to get a new historicist, which simply means I'm taking the story in the time in which it was written. Because I think what's one of the things that's so remarkable about this story is it recognizes within itself how fucked up these treatments were, these quote unquote treatments for depression or nervous conditions or hysteria were. And we're going and in the story illustrates, I think quite gracefully, let me know if you disagree, how the treatment in this case is absolutely worse than the disease. We start out with a relatively reliable narrator who very quickly, and when you read the story, if you go back and read it again after you read it the first time, you're not entirely sure if she was ever reliable. It's a first person narration. Um, and so it's very close. I don't even think we know her first name, do we?
No,
No, we don't know the character's name.
because
Yeah.
her husband only addresses her as things like little girl.
Little girl and darling and dear. And yeah, I have a lot to say about John. We do know the husband's first name, and it's John, and I've got a lot to say
Because
about
of
John.
course we do, and because of course it is.
Of course it is John. All right. Mm. Now, a funny thing is that I remembered reading this story back as an undergraduate
Mm-hmm.
and thinking that the protagonist was English because it's set in England, and then and then I've taught this story, and I had to realize very quickly that the protagonist is actually American. The couple in question, our nameless lady and John, are ooh are American. I'm sorry, I just realized why she doesn't have a name. She does. Well, she only writes alone and to herself, but later on, towards the end of the story, that's why she doesn't have a name. I don't even know if she knows who she is or which one she is anymore.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Oh, well, definitely by the end of the story, she doesn't know which one she is.
Yeah. So okay, so we'll get there. We will get to it. We will get to it. But that's certainly the best / most horrific aspect of this short story. It's very well crafted.
How's that for an intro?
Hey.
Hope you read the story.
If not, we'll give you enough to chew on, I promise. Okay, so where did this was published in 1892, just to give you the citation here. 1892 in New England Magazine, by Boston Small Maynard and Company, and then 1899 again, Rockwell and Churchill Press, Boston, Harvard University Library. So again, you can find the yellow wallpaper. You just Google it, and it will pop up right on your phone. Oh, wow, you probably can't see that.
Yeah.
I'm
You
sorry.
have to get it closer.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, and you can read it on your phone for free. So it's
the
around for a long time.
The first result that comes up when you just type the title into Google is the Google Books edition of it, which you can read either straight online or download as a PDF.
Yes.
From a standalone, tiny little standalone volume that was scanned once upon a time by the Harvard University Library from a copy printed by the Harvard University Library. So.
Yes. And what's cool about that particular version is students checked this out. So there are notes. There are annotations, not full on notes, but there are certain lines are underlined, and there are little arrows pointing to things, and it gives you for one thing, it's a nice guide. If you haven't read it, like for me, it's been probably 10 years since I've read this short story.
It's twice that for me.
There we go. And so it was actually kind of nice to go, oh, right. Yeah, no, that is an important line. I need to write that down. So there were quite a few of those. And we get one on the very first page. So again, it starts with this narrator just writing about where she is. We know she's a she. We know she's married to a man named John. And she's a little nervous about they've come to England to stay in a house for 3 months, and they've rented it, and they got a really good price on the rent, and she doesn't quite trust that. And then the first thing she says after she lists like what makes her uneasy about this colonial mansion or hereditary estate, as she describes it, is John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in marriage. So there's your first page. Very telling, very face palm line, like
welcome to our happy little home.
Isn't it lovely? Why don't you come in? Yeah, it doesn't.
Won't you have some tea with us?
It doesn't get much worse than that, and she's uneasy in this new place, and she goes on to talk about her husband in very glowing fashion about how practical he is, what a skeptic he is. He has what she calls a tense. He has no patience, is a quote. He has no patience with faith and intense horror of superstition, and he scoffs openly at any talk of things not to be felt and seen and put down in figures. Now, normally, I'd be all on John's team for this.
Yes.
Right?
This is my man.
I'd be like, all right, John, I'm right there with you, buddy.
But skeptics can be assholes too.
They can. And in the 19th century, skeptics and doctors, which we find out on the second page in the second starting paragraph, is that John is a physician. And
of some nebulous stripe. It's never clearly defined what it is, what branch of medicine it is that he practices.
Yeah,
so
just
he
that he
have some, at the very least, a competent for the time understanding of, for the time, the approach to psychological disorders, like hysteria. For the time. What was it? 1892.
1892 is when it was. So for the crazy women folk.
Yes.
Yeah, he's got
your ovaries start migrating all over the place, and your poor little brain can't even handle it.
No one knows. You're so emotional. What's happening? And that becomes a theme. Actually, she talks constantly about how she's being more quiet. She's being more quiet. She's being more quiet. Like she's willing. And he tells her at one point, no one can fix this but you have to, marshal your, I'm paraphrasing, you have to marshal your will and make this go away, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, very early on in the
clear
story,
exactly what it is she did to begin with.
Nope.
But apparently she fucked up real bad, probably caused a scene at a dinner party.
because they went across an ocean to get her better for
And
3 months.
they took her on a 3-month rest cure to the other side of the planet.
Yeah. And if you don't,
and stuck her up in the old nursery on the 3rd floor.
And sure they did. If you don't know what a rest cure was, this is essentially how, if you were a woman of means, if you were a married lady married to a man who made a decent living, a rest cure was basically you were locked up somewhere, either at home or at a vacation house or a second house. And you weren't supposed to, you were supposed to have as little stimulation as possible. You weren't supposed to engage in any work. Our narrator states several times that she's a writer, and that even though writing is exhausting to her right now, she really feels like if she could do it, she might start to get better, but she's not supposed to. She's not even supposed to be writing what we're reading, right? She
mentioned several times having to,
having
oh dear, here comes John. I've got to
Right.
scroll this away somewhere so he doesn't find out that I've been exerting myself with pen and paper.
Or here comes Jenny, her sister-in-law, who's doing double duty as housekeeper and nursemaid. Hang on, before we go too far though, I do want to make sure we don't skip ahead too much. So, yeah, okay. So John has her. We learn by page 6 that John has her on a prescription, as she puts it, for let's see. Let me find it here. Okay. I have a scheduled prescription for each hour in the day. It takes all care from me, and so I feel basely ungrateful not to value it more. But the thing is, she's a grown woman and she's being given nothing to do because she has a nervous condition that she says her husband doesn't really believe in, and neither does her brother, who is also an upstanding physician. But what can one do? She asks early on. I mean, they're the ones who know. The men know. They went to school, right? They got to go to school. They know what, why am I not completely fulfilled, entertaining and being an upper middle class housewife? Yeah.
You know what the whole preamble reminds me of is that first sentence in The Telltale Heart.
Yeah.
Yes, nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad?
Yeah, precisely. And
because she goes out of her way to explain that, yes, she has a nervous disposition. Yes, she's high strung. Yes, she always has been. But she ain't crazy.
Right.
She's very clear on that.
But
she ain't crazy.
I'm not crazy.
And
I
that'll
want
become
to get better.
Very important, very, very quickly.
It will. And also I want to get better. I want to be of help to my husband. I always dreamed of being such help to my husband. And now I'm just a burden. Right? I mean, she actually says
it's a term she uses several times.
Yeah. So he tells
and the fear
her,
of becoming yet more burdensome.
Yeah, yep, that
it
plays
just weighs heavy on her throughout the story.
Yeah, it all snowballs, absolutely. So he says, "Your exercise depends on your strength, my dear," said he, "and your food somewhat on your appetite, but air you can absorb all the time." So we took the nursery at the top of the house. So this was your classic rest cure of the 19th century. Get a lot of air, get a lot of sunlight, but don't let them wander about unaccompanied too much because they might do something weird or unbecoming.
And she's allowed the run of the grounds.
Well,
for a while.
Maybe. She says she is. And then you get to the end and you're like, was she? Or was she sneaking out? Although she did have the key. That is evident.
She had the key to her room. The key to her room at the very least.
She did.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry guys. I feel like we're talking without you,
we'll get to that.
Yeah, okay, so All right, so the paint and paper looked as if a boys' school had used it. It is stripped off the paper. This is on page 7, and the reason I'm reading this out to you is because this is very important later. On page 7, the paper in great patches all around the head of the bed, about as far as I can reach, and in a great place on the other side of the room, low down. I never saw a worse paper in my life. And then she goes on to describe this lurid, disgusting yellow wallpaper that looks as though the curves of it are trying to commit suicide. The color is repellent. And later on, it develops an odor, which is fascinating as well. It takes on a whole other aspect, and she
and so positively scandalous in that era.
Yeah.
You did not speak of odors. One of the big things that got Oscar Wilde in trouble for his writing, not his scandalous personal life, but his writing particularly. One of the big objections people had was that he was forever talking about how things smelled. He was forever talking about perfumes and flowers and scents.
And these are not things one mentions in polite
society. It was considered at the time. It was considered to be just gauche, if not gross.
Yeah.
To speak of odors.
Mm-hmm. And
this is a risk she's taking.
It is a risk.
Writing about, because the passage about the yellow odor is not brief.
No, it goes on.
She speaks about it in some detail, and for
it gets
a
in
while.
her hair, it gets in her clothes, especially once it starts raining. Like when it's sunny, it's not so bad. They can open the windows, but when it rains and it's musty. I'm sorry. I just took musty. My brain instantly went to mold, right? We're also talking about the time when gas lighting and heating was first being introduced, along with electricity, which led to some really dangerous shit happening in Victorian era homes. But yeah, so you're getting all of that introduced into some of these old places as well.
So question while we're on the topic.
Yeah.
Is the smell real?
I don't know. I don't know if it's real or if it's part of her hallucination. Because she early on.
It's not introduced until she's obviously spiraling out of control.
She is obviously spiraling by the time
she's already seeing things. She's seeing the women outside.
Yeah.
By that
point.
And
she says she can ride, which is weird. I'm like, who's letting you ride horses? But we'll get there. But like in that, there's this one throwaway line. But even when I ride, if I turn and I smell my hair, the smell is in my hair, and it's just
and that's at a point where she's not allowed to do anything. She's not hardly allowed to get out of bed.
Yeah, I don't think she's allowed to leave the room at that point.
I don't think by that point anything she says can be trusted. I think this riding she's doing is completely all in her head, and I say that the smell is completely in her head.
I would agree.
That's my guess.
Well, and as evidence for that in the story itself, as early as page 8, when she's describing the color of the wallpaper, she says the color is repellent, almost revolting, a smoldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded. It is a dull yet lurid orange in some places, a sickly sulfur tint in others. So when most of us think of sulfur, we don't instantly think of what sulfur looks like unless we're chemists. We think of what sulfur smells like, which is like rotten eggs, if you've ever been near a sulfur spring. It's gross. And so I think that juxtaposition coming in early on is evidence for what you're saying.
Could be foreshadowing of the phantom smell.
Absolutely.
Phantom smells are a classic sign of a lot of mental illnesses.
They are. It's actually a rare scent is one. We should say scent. I know. What's the Mark Twain quote? You smell, sir. I stink.
You smell. I stink.
Right? Yeah. But we don't use it that way anymore, and language is usage. So, but anyway, and it's really interesting. She talks about how children, this was a nursery, and children must have just destroyed this room, right? And she starts talking about that so early on. I mean, just the first, it's a 54 roughly page story, 50 to 54, depending on how you're formatting. But I mean, as early as page 8 and 9, she's saying, no wonder the children hated it. I should hate it myself if I had to live in this room long. There comes John, and I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. And that's the first and last, second and last paragraph on page 9. So there we have her. She's already hiding things from her husband, who's trying to treat her. And in John's defense, as best he knows how at the time.
According to the best methods of the
Yeah,
time. Yes.
I don't want to vilify John too much, which is why I'm a new historicist when it comes to criticism, because it's really not fair to say, oh, John was a misogynistic, controlling asshole who clearly saw his wife as a child and not as a person in his own right. Yeah, I think all of that is true, but that was also the norm.
Yeah, he did. But
did.
Then so did essentially all men in 1895.
So did the vast majority of people in that era, and not just men either. There were women who claimed. I remember. I can't. Oh, I wish I could cite it. I wish I'd thought of this before now. But there was a woman who wrote a kind of a scientific paper. She got it published. She got a scientific paper published. She was no Madame Curie, don't get me wrong, but she had measured the skulls of a whole bunch of women and a whole bunch of men, and deduced from that since women tend to have smaller heads than men, our brains are smaller, and therefore we need people with that certain equipment to look after us, because oh my gosh, everything's just so hard.
When all else fails, turn to phrenology.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Hey, Jay, welcome.
Hey, Jay. Yeah, so we're in the yellow wallpaper talking about weird shit. All right, so she talks about John being away at night a lot, and I gotta say,
with these difficult cases that he has to spend a lot of time with
in the village that's 3 miles away, and I'm just like, yeah, really. What you doing, John?
Oh, does he indeed?
Does he indeed?
He's suddenly got a lot of very difficult cases that necessitate a lot of time away from home as soon as his wife starts to deteriorate.
Oh, and yeah, I gotta say, I want to make sure I don't miss him here. Pardon me. Keep the people entertained for a second.
I shall do my best.
Okay. All right. No, we're good. I haven't missed it yet. Okay. So she's. I just didn't want to. Okay. So the next bit starts with, we've been here 2 weeks. She says she hasn't felt like writing since that first day, and then she talks about John being away all night, all day, and sometimes all night on difficult cases, and then all on its own, a sentence with an exclamation mark. I am glad my case is not serious. Yeah. Not serious, my Aunt Fanny. Okay.
Not serious enough to warrant John's incessant medical attention.
Certainly not. No, certainly serious
or
enough.
Institutionalization, which would have been the next step if the rest cure didn't work.
Maybe. It depends on the shame it'll bring the family, though, and what he's willing to deal with.
There's no mention of extended family.
There isn't.
If that was
cousins. There's mention of 2 cousins, but they're weird. Yeah. They're the weird, crazy, fun cousins.
But there's no mention of the overpowering influence of the terrifying dowager aunt.
No.
None of those kind of figures that tend to figure so large in fiction of this time.
Yeah, and again, I was speaking kind of out of text there. I was speaking of like, yeah, this was the mad woman in the attic stage of our culture. It happened across the pond. It happened in America. Like, if you had an insane family member, you could keep that shit under wraps, you did, because you didn't want the rest of your community to know that. It could make it harder to get, your children married off and all kinds of things. It could just cause all kinds of bad, because as much as we talk about mental health stigma now, it was nothing.
So much worse.
It was so much worse then. So, yeah, so you were more likely to get committed to an asylum if you were poor, or if your family was wealthy enough to get you snuck in there. snuck in there,
or sent to one in another
secreted
country.
in there, or sent to one, or sent to one in another country, and they could tell everyone, oh, she's taking a year in Europe, and then whatever they wanted, you know. Okay, so yeah, so of course it is only nervousness. It does weigh on me so not to do my duty in any way. So she's feeling guilty. She's not being a proper wife. She's certainly not being a proper 19th century wife. She's supposed to be entertaining. She's supposed to be at least telling the servants what to do or making meals and doing things herself.
Yeah. There is a line in there at some point about how entertaining tires her so.
Yes.
Very early on.
Yes.
And then she's essentially bedridden for the bulk of the story. And when they bring the cousins they bring the cousins over because he thinks it'll do her good to see people, and that just completely fucking wipes her out. It takes every spoon she's got.
Yeah, they have some people come for a whole week to celebrate the 4th of July, and by the end of it, she's exhausted. And frankly, so would I be.
So would I be, yeah.
Jesus, Jones, a week? No, you cannot stay here for a week, any of you. Love y'all, but no. Okay, so... So she says, I meant to be such a help to John, such a real rest and comfort. And here I am, a comparative burden already. That was the line we were referring to otherwise. And here we go. Finally, on page 11, we get this revelation. Page 11, nobody would believe what an effort it is to do what little I am able. Now, this really sounds like classic depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
To dress and entertain and order things. It is fortunate Mary is so good with the baby. So now we know on page 11 that she has an infant child. So this sounds to me like postpartum depression, but people didn't know about that then. Right? Did somebody already type it in?
No.
Oh, I was like, oh, cool if you did. No, that's fine. But yeah. And then she starts comparing herself to John in an unhealthy way. She says, such a dear baby, and yet I cannot be with him. It makes me so nervous. She is terrified to be with her own son. And that is also a sign of postpartum depression. Mm-hmm. I've had friends who have had postpartum depression, and they love their children. You could not, no one with any eyes to see or ears to hear could say they don't love their children, but they went through a rough time after they gave birth, and it's very common. But again, didn't know that then. Okay, so initially, what did you think about when John initially was willing to repaper the room? Because she's complaining about the wallpaper to him, how horrible it is.
It felt...
Because he's like, yeah, I'll repaper it, but...
Yeah. It was just... It didn't feel like a genuine offer. It felt just absolutely laden with condescension.
Yeah.
As do all of his interactions with her. It's very... There, don't you worry your pretty little head.
Yeah.
And the
his
rationale. Is this when he says if I change the wallpaper, then you'll be complaining that the bed is too big, too heavy, and then you'll be complaining about the bars on the windows, and then you'll be complaining about the gate at the top of the stairs, and then it's a slippery slope, hon. Let's not start down it.
But I got to stop you there, because this is when we find out on page 12 that there are bars on the windows,
which she early dismisses as a sign of his having once been a boys' dormitory
or a boys' dormitory.
And you wouldn't want, boys will be boys. And you don't want them clambering in and out of the windows in the middle of the night.
Sure.
Except
gate at the top of the stairs. So this is where, when reading, because I read this,
which it's never meant. We find out later on she has the key to the door to her room. There's never mentioned anything about the key to the gate.
No, there's not. And we know that Mary, her sister-in-law, can get into the room.
Yeah. Mary comes and goes at will.
Yeah, she brings her food. She comes and goes as she will. So we know that. So seeing all of this just through her lens and just through the eyes of, again, this unnamed narrator who seems to be standing for all women who have suffered mental illness in this time and in this culture. Um, it's when I read that with barred windows and then the gate at the head of the stairs and so on, I was like, gate at the head of the motherfucking what?
Yeah. It's like,
Like,
whoa, 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 whoa,
whoa.
whoa. Back that shit right up.
Yeah, because she was talking about how beautiful it was outside and how she really wanted her and John's bedroom to be one of the downstairs rooms because there was this lovely room that had roses growing around the window and sounds a lot fucking better than the room with the scary ass wallpaper, the bed nailed to the floor, bars on the windows, and a gate at the top of the stairs. I mean, it's just terrifying. Like the more I read this today, I started wondering if she ever actually, like, if she was ever in that 3-month period actually let out of the house. Like, she may or may not have escaped more than once, but it's hard to tell.
It's really, really hard to tell.
Yeah,
because
and
she's fairly early on established as a fairly unreliable narrator, and the further into the story we go, she becomes exponentially more unreliable to the point where there's no telling if what you're reading is actually happening or not.
Yeah.
Or if it's just her laying in bed with visions of sugar plums dancing.
Yeah, and they're not happy sugar plums. And okay, so he
Thank you, Paul. Good to know.
Oh. So John condescends to her again.
Shock her.
She has to go downstairs again. There are such pretty rooms there. Then he took me in his arms and called me a blessed little goose and said he would go down cellar if I wished and have it whitewashed in the bargain. But he is right enough about the beds and windows and things. It is as airy and comfortable a room as anyone need wish. And of course, I would not be so silly as to make him uncomfortable just for a whim. So in the beginning, again, I mean, we're at page 13 now, and she's more worried about discomfiting him than I mean, everything she's requested up until this point sounds perfectly reasonable. Again, we can't be sure. If she's right, if she's remembering correctly about the way he speaks to her, I get why she's gone a little round the bend. I think there would have been more anger in mine. And then she, as anyone who is institutionalized, she starts to get a little used to it, which is creepy in and of itself. Stockholm syndrome does kind of start to set in, and so let's see. Sorry. Okay, yeah, we did that. I'll have to come back to that. John laughs at her again. Blessed little goose. That was irritating. Okay, this is interesting. So on page 13, she says she talks about what she can see out of the windows. Yeah, and it's really lovely. It's a beautiful description of mysterious deep shaded arbors, the riotous old fashioned flowers and bushes and gnarly trees. Out of another, I get a lovely view of the bay and a little private wharf belonging to the estate. There's a beautiful shaded lane. This is going to be important later, or I wouldn't read it at you. Shaded lane that runs down there from the house. I always fancy, and this is in the older American speech, I imagine, right? That's what she's saying is I imagine. I always fancy I see people walking in these numerous paths and arbors, but John has cautioned me not to give way to fancy in the least. He says that with my imaginative power and habit of story making, a nervous weakness like mine is sure to lead to all manner of excited fancies, and that I ought to use my will and good sense to check the tendency. So I try. I can't even in this moment. Can you? What do you have to say about that?
it's the whole. I mean, the whole John character just positively oozes with condescension, and it's, this is not unusual for fiction of this time. The problem is with fiction the difference, I should say, rather, the difference is with fiction of this time, it's usually written from the male perspective, and so you get you get your cringy moments when somebody addresses their wife as "you silly goose," but it tends, there's somehow a difference between reading two things from the same time period from the aggressive versus the aggressee perspective.
Yeah, very much so.
And if you've got one part, if you've got the dominant party saying, now remember, your fancies have a tendency to run away with you, so don't exercise your poor little brains too much. Now I'm going to go on about my manly way. Reading that in the 21st century makes us cringe and want to write angry posts on the internet. But reading it recounted from the non-dominant party's perspective is so much worse.
Yes,
because not only are you seeing it from the perspective of the person who's being condescended to, but the blandness and the flatness and the level of acceptance with which she receives this condescension and these girlifying statements and these little pat on the head instructions is maddening in its own way. You feel bad for her and you feel bad at her.
Yeah.
There's that 21st century part of who wants to say, stand up for yourself, bitch.
Right?
Jesus Christ, say something out loud for once. Holy crap. Except for the fact that standing up for yourself, bitch, and saying something out loud for once, holy crap, is probably what put her in this situation to begin with.
May have. And also, it's not, I mean, she talks about doing her duty. She says, being laughed at by your husband is something to expect in marriage. And it's what you said, very flatly, very accepting.
Yeah. Oh, Ellen, put those things away. You know how the cause infuriates Mr. Banks.
Okay. That will be the last reference to that musical, I hope, in this moment. Okay. But yeah.
I thought it was fairly
apropos.
Was
awesome. That was fantastic. Are you kidding? I loved that. Okay. So here we go. So she tries. What's interesting here, though, is that this is the last time, and we're only on page 14. This is the last time when she's seeing people. She imagines seeing people walking down there in the garden and down the lane.
Walking
is an important word here. Thank you. Walking isn't they're right. Walking is very important here. Also, not just walking, but the fancy part. And so she is more lucid. The speaker is more lucid in this moment than we're going to see later on. So let's get there. And she says, so I try. She'll even try. She wants to get well enough to write a little, but I feel I get pretty tired when I try. And about work. She says it is discouraging not to have any advice and companionship about my work because she's not allowed to work right now. It's bad for the nervous condition. You shouldn't tax your brain. That's part of the rest cure, again. Which actually anyone in the chat or in this apartment who has struggled with mental illness can tell you that leaving your brain just idle is probably the worst thing you can fucking do. Right?
You gotta keep the drivetrain engaged.
Yeah, even if it's just coloring pretty pictures, and those like adult coloring books, not XXX adult, but you know what I mean, the ones they make for adults. whatever it is, you've got to keep something going on up there, or it's just going to be bad. Okay, so yeah, all right, so let's go to expression of, oh yeah, the inanimate things. This is interesting. So we hit pareidolia at this point, which is important in the story because so important. I mean,
in this story.
the yellow wallpaper is the titular character, and I say character and I mean it. Like the wallpaper absolutely takes on a life of its own. So she's seeing patterns in it, and at first she just thinks they're ugly and she hates it. But as it goes on, she starts to see movement. Now imagine you're locked in a room with some gauche as fuck late Victorian era or 1970s era, because let's face it, they weren't that different. Like, you know, big, like mushroomy or floral, loud wallpaper. And you're also dealing with depression or postpartum depression or some form of mental illness. You're gonna start to, that shit's gonna start to move. I mean, we all do that. We've all looked at tile in a perfectly cogent state, you know, perfectly mentally healthy, and looked down at the tile in a restroom and made patterns out of it, because that's what our brains do. We're pattern making machines. And so she starts to full on hallucinate. So she talks about that. So she talks about there is a recurrent spot where the pattern lulls like a broken neck and two bulbous eyes stare at you upside down. That, I wondered if that was foreshadowing for the rope, but then it ended the way it did, so I guess not. But
it smells like foreshadowing, but it turns out not to be.
It's not. It's not. Yeah. I got positively angry with the impertinence of it. She's calling an inanimate object impertinent, right? And the everlastingness. Up and down and sideways, they crawl, and those absurd, unblinking eyes are everywhere. And she goes on and on. And it's an excellent description. And you really see her. You know, we all know how much expression they have, meaning inanimate objects. And then she talks about some comforting ones from her youth, when she was a child, when she was a little girl. And there was a particular chair that felt very strong and safe, and she would sit in it and she would feel safe in that chair. Or you know, a certain you know, knob on a bureau or something, you know, and she goes on to that. So she's talking about you know, the inanimate objects that have brought her pleasure and comfort in the past. And then this wallpaper, it's just she becomes obsessed slowly and surely.
It just drives her up the wall.
It literally kind of does. Okay. Literally and figuratively drives her up the wall.
Sorry, couldn't resist. Apologies.
No apology necessary. That was fantastic. The furniture in this room is no worse than inharmonious. However, for we had to bring it all from downstairs. I suppose when this, I read that with the emphasis on the wrong syllable. I'm sorry. Hold up. The furniture in this room is no worse than inharmonious. However, for we had to bring it all from downstairs. I suppose when this was used as a playroom, they had to take the nursery things out, and no wonder. I never saw such ravages as the children have made here. The wallpaper, as I said before, is torn off in spots, and it sticketh closer than a brother. She mentioned her brother was a physician who also, ding, 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 agreed with John about John's diagnosis. And by the way, everyone, regardless of gender, regardless of your state of being, whether you're in a relationship or not, whether you have a partner or not, a husband or wife or not, no one related to you should be administering your medical care, period, full stop. I think we all know this now, but this is another sign of the time. You know, her diagnoses and her treatment were all prescribed by her husband and her brother. All right. They must have had perseverance as well as hatred. Speaking of the children that she believes still lived in the room. And then she talks again about John's sister. She hears her on the stairs, and she doesn't quite trust the sister, right? Her
Oh
sister-in-law.
no,
No,
she does not.
no. And in fact, she says, "I verily believe she thinks it is the writing which made me sick." And she has to hide that she's writing anything when the sister comes around because she knows the sister will tell John. And later there's a whole conversation where, well, not a whole conversation, but there's a whole bit where she talks about overhearing Mary giving John a full report.
Mhm.
Yeah. So this is where it starts to get really weird. Do you want to read this bit?
Yeah.
It's the I can see a strange.
Oh, but in the places.
Yeah.
Okay. But in the places where it isn't faded, and where the sun is just so, I can see a strange, provoking, formless sort of figure that seems to sulk about beyond that silly and conspicuous front design. There's sister on the stairs.
And she has to put her writing implements away. And in that moment, that's the first. I said earlier that it was pareidolia, and it was. That's our first full-on hallucination, right? As far as we know, that's page 18. She hasn't. The narrator hasn't fully realized what it is that she's seeing, but she's thinking that she's seeing something, and oof, creepy, right?
Oh, yes.
Like chills. I love it. I love it so much. Oh, okay.
And you know what she's talking about because you've seen that wallpaper. You know, the horrible floral wallpaper within the raised design that's just a little shimmery in the light. And it's an abstract design that sort of seems to float just behind the vines and the flowers.
Yep.
And if you look at it too long, it goes away. And if you look past it for too long, it starts to sort of move in your peripheral vision. I mean, this is not a stretch.
No.
But for someone experiencing postpartum psychosis, this is bad.
It's bad. Yeah. This is just
This
going to
is
feed
not-
into all the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here we get to the part you were talking about, and also the part where I have to apologize to our audience because I've been calling John's sister Mary this entire time, and her name is Jenny. My bad. Here you go. So sorry about that, y'all.
Let's see. The 4th of July is over. The people are all gone, and I am tired out. John thought it might do me good to see a little company, so we had just Mother and Nellie and the children down for a week. Unclear as to whether Mother is the narrator's mother or Mother is John's mother.
Yeah, we don't know. And we don't
would
find
not
out.
would not have been uncommon at the time for the husband's mother to have been referred to by the wife as mother.
And honestly, I kind of would have liked to have known, just because it would have shown the power dynamic of this family a little bit better, but it works either way, honestly, and I kind of get why she didn't bother to clear it, because it wouldn't make sense to clear it up. It wouldn't be like now where
It's
we
not
say
a
my
necessary
mother-in-law.
detail.
Yeah, it's not. She just wouldn't have written, if she's writing this to herself as a diary. She wouldn't have written, my mother-in-law, blah, because she's not clarifying for anyone. She knows whether it was her mother or John's mother, and she knows who she means by that. So it makes sense narratively. Sorry, go ahead.
Of course, I didn't do a thing. Jenny sees to everything now, but it tired me all the same. And then this line. John says if I don't pick up faster, he shall send me to Weir Mitchell in the fall. But I don't want to go there at all. I had a friend who was in his hands once, and she says he is just like John and my brother, only more so.
Yep. So this is some other...
If you don't get better, I'm going to send you to the real head shrinker.
Yeah. I'm going to send you to the real alienist. And it's a threat. I mean, it's absolutely she certainly perceives it as a threat.
Yeah, especially since he's said all along, this is all on you. It is your own efforts. You must pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get better.
Mm-hmm. Or by your corset laces.
And then, and then this comes around, well, you're not doing your job, hun. You need to get better, and you need to get better soon, or I'm going to send you to the nice man with the electrical machine.
Come on, sanity it up, or, you know. And the fact that she had a friend who told her this, because
who had already been through all this.
Yeah, and
except for the wallpaper.
Especially except for the wallpaper. Especially given you know, the ways that men and women and everyone in between communicates. It's like particularly when gender roles were this hardcore in terms of what you like, you were assigned whatever at birth, and by God, you were gonna be that.
And you were going to be that in the extremely specific way.
Yep. And that's why our dear friend Oscar Wilde ended up in prison doing hard labor, you know, because he wasn't that. And it's awful. Anyway, so this is that time, right? So the thing about that, though, is that it does create a certain society, not just among men talking to other men, but also women talking to women. There are things that women don't talk to men about, no matter how intimate their relationship. I mean, you could have a couple that's truly in love, deeply cis het couple in love, wants to have all the babies and do everything right and has no issue with any of it, adore each other. And there are just certain things that the wife is never going to talk to her husband about in society in this time, you know. And so and one of those things would be, well, have you ever, you know, not wanted to hold your newborn because I feel like I'm a horrible mother, you know, that kind of thing. You would never bring that up to a male.
It still feels like breaking a taboo when people mention it now.
I felt weird saying it. People constantly ask me, like, if I'm gonna have kids, and I'm like, I'm 42. What the fuck do you think? I haven't done it yet. Yeah. Like, honestly, that I know. Anyway, and I get guilted for that on occasion, but we're not gonna go there right now. Nobody's, not my story to tell. Okay. Well, I mean, it is
nobody's business if I do.
That's right. It is my story to tell, but I'm not going to drag anyone else online that is not here to defend themselves. Anywho, okay. Sorry about that. So, point. There is one. Where Mitchell in the fall. Yeah, that's terrifying. So, and we're only getting this, again, we only get this from the narrator's point of view. The only stuff that I think we can take as being reliable is when she writes things that she and John say in quotation marks. And the one time that Jenny speaks and it's in quotation marks. I trust her that far. I trust her to have recorded what was said. Because also what was said was never beyond the pale. It was nothing that made you go, what the fuck? You know. But so I think, you know, for all we know, John may have been trying, and this is not in the text. I'm trying to give him a lot of latitude here. He might have meant it as a comforting thing, like, well, you know, darling, if I'm not the one who can help you with this, you know, maybe where Mitchell can. And she is definitely going to perceive that as a threat.
Ooh.
Because, yeah, it's almost creepier.
I say you're wrong.
Oh, well, I would love to be wrong about that, honestly. Trust me, I want to throw John under that bus. I'm trying to be generous. So.
I think you're being entirely too generous.
Okay, cool.
I think you need to put your boot heel in the small of John's back and shove him in front of that fucking Mack truck as it comes barreling towards you at about Mach 5. All right. John belongs under those wheels.
So trolley problem if John was the one.
Sorry,
if there
John.
Were 5 Johns and one crazy lady. We're throwing the switch. Sorry. Yeah, fair.
Because there's something in the. Let me.
It's the page up.
Yeah, it's just one page back.
I did not know this would be such an interesting point. This is exciting, guys. This is what used to happen when I taught classes. Somebody would bring up something, and it's like, oh yeah, no, let's talk about that more. Okay.
Yeah, it's just that one sentence. John says, "If I don't pick up faster, he shall send me to Weir Mitchell in the fall.
Okay. No, this is
And they're
you're
here
right.
and they're here for the summer.
Yeah.
This is a summer vacation.
3 months.
Yeah, 3 months, which means it's a summer vacation.
Yes, and they talk
it's
about it
just
being
been
summer.
and it's just been the 4th of July.
Yeah.
So John says, and it's the phrasing, if I don't pick up faster, if I don't put in my work and do it more quickly as he would prefer, then when we get home, he's going to send me to the real head shrinker.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
And I think I don't think there's any latitude to be given here for John being a good guy. This is 100% a threat, especially because there is no circumstance in 1892 in which he does not know that one of her friends has already been in Doc Mitchell's treatment program.
Yeah, that's also.
So what he's saying is, you remember how horrendous Rita said Doc Mitchell's treatment was, but she came out of it so much better and more compliant. You remember how much her husband loves her now that she's all compliant and quiet, which is what we're trying to get you to be of your own volition. If you don't do that of your own volition, I'm sending you to Doc Mitchell soon as we get home.
Yeah.
No, it is 100% a threat.
And we can't, and you're right, because we cannot discount the diction in this story.
Yeah.
Because
it's all we've got.
It's all
we have is her word choice.
Mm-hmm. And it's so careful, and it's so distinctive,
and it's so precise.
Precise, yes.
There is literally not a word wasted in this whole story.
No, and so when I tell you this is 54 pages long, but y'all,
but
is
it's 54 pages on a PDF file from a folio edition of a short story.
Yeah, it's not that long. So please, if you haven't read it, please read it at some point.
Spoilers.
Yes, there are things. Okay, so the let's see, where are we? So ravages of the children in the room. Can't let her sister-in-law catch her working. First appearance of the strange, provoking, formless figure.
Mm-hmm. And that was at the end of this chapter.
And then that was the end of the 4th of July. And then on page 21, right after the threat about Weir Mitchell, and that we're pronouncing it that way because it's spelled Weir and then Mitchell. So this is probably a German American, I would imagine.
In which case, honestly, it's probably Weir.
Or something like that. Weir. No. Yeah, something. What you said.
Weir. EIR would be Weir.
What Junk Shop said. I'm not as good.
Herr Dr. Professor Mitchell.
Which is sad because I'm the one who had the grandfather who spoke fluent German and I didn't learn shit. Okay, so here we go. So, here the narrator says, I am alone a good deal just now. John is kept in town very often by serious cases, and Jenny is good and lets me alone when I want her to. So I walk a little in the garden or down that lovely lane, sit on the porch under the roses, and lie down up here a good deal. And this is where we start to go, are you really? Because you mentioned the gate at the top of the stairs. You said you were fancying people, seeing people walking about down the lane. At this point in the story, I was going with it. I was like, okay, oh, that's nice. She's walking around. She's getting some exercise. That's actually good for depression. We actually know that. That's still a thing. So good. Maybe that will help. And then she says, I'm getting really fond of the room in spite of the wallpaper. Perhaps because of the wallpaper. And that word because is in italics, and it's in the writer italicized to that. So we have our narrator saying that, this wallpaper that she's been obsessing over, that's been haunting her, it's been keeping her awake at night, it's freaking creepy. She doesn't like it. And now she's like, I'm getting rather fond of the room. Right? It's sort of that institutionalization, I think, is what's happening there. It dwells in my mind, so is the next line and a paragraph all by itself. I lie here on this great immovable bed. It is nailed down, I believe.
It is. She mentions that several times.
It is, yeah. She goes into detail about how nailed down the four-post bed is, and follow, which I think might be a metaphor for also for the marriage bed itself, but and follow that.
I would
pattern.
not discount that. It seems like a reach to me, but I would not discount it out of hand.
Yeah, I wouldn't discount. And again, it's nothing I would palaver
especially
over,
since John
but-
is not staying up there with her.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
she
one of
does.
the reasons John discounts the room downstairs as a room for them is that there's not room enough for two beds.
And it's
And-
the 1890s, not the 1950s. What the fuck they doing with two beds? What is happening? Was this a thing?
Oh yeah.
Because I'm the one who's supposed to be a new historicist, and I'm just like, was that even a thing then? I don't even know.
Oh, it was a thing in a lot of places. It was a
Ugh.
superstition in Eastern Europe.
Really?
Yeah. If the house is filled with dread, place the beds at head to head. It was a ghost banishing technique.
Yeah. But
Um,
John hates superstition, so he's not doing it for that reason.
No, but
It,
but
maybe
it
out of
was-
some prudery.
it was not uncommon to have his bed and her bed. That wasn't just an American television convention, although it was for a long, long time.
way too long. Way longer than it was for the rest of the culture. Let's put it that way. Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. And she goes on to state that like watching the wallpaper is as good as gymnastics, I assure you. And then she said, I will follow that pointless pattern to some sort of conclusion. And that's where, as a reader, you start to go, okay.
Starting to wonder a little about.
I'm not.
I was willing to take your word for it for a while, but
Yeah.
I'm starting to see some danger Will Robinsons up in here.
We're seeing some red flags, and again, I mean, I never. I reread the story twice today. I read it as a teenager. I read it when I was teaching. And it might be that I identify as a woman, but I can never read this story and not take the narrator's side. I just do. I don't think.
Well, there are no other characters.
Not really.
I mean, the other characters are only invoked as in terms of their immediate impact on the narrator's life in the moment.
Mhm.
They're not fleshed out. We don't know how tall anybody is. We don't know what color anybody's eyes are. The only colors in the story are the colors in the wallpaper.
Yeah, I mean,
Even the
and
garden.
the greens in the garden. She does mention the greens.
She does mention the greens in the garden, but she talks about the flowers and doesn't mention what kind of flowers or what colors they are.
No.
She does that.
Except in comparison to the wallpaper, where
Yeah.
she says not a lovely yellow like buttercups, but the bad yellow.
But even then, it's not a lovely color like the buttercups outside. It's
Mhm.
just it's in an abstract.
It's in the abstract. Very good.
She might well have said like the light of the sun, or like
Sure. Sure.
and,
Or like
and the other characters, most of them never appear on stage.
No.
They're mentioned, and their busyness and their effects are mentioned time to time, their effect on her, and nobody ever comes into that room
No.
except for once.
Jenny comes in once,
Except
and then
for that-
another time at the end.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll get there.
those two times that Jenny
Yeah.
comes into the room.
Yeah. And what's really disturbing, and another thing that makes me think
And
this
yeah,
is
you're
a
right. And then
classic.
they know more.
Yeah, and this is a classic case of postpartum depression that they didn't know about at the time, is that she mentions the baby early on. John, at some point, she writes down what he said for the good of, for my well-being, our child's, and yourself. So let's put everybody in the right pecking order, right? Of importance. You need to get your shit under control, basically. And that's the only other time the baby's even mentioned. So she's not. And then she talks about these phantom children that she imagined must have been in this room, because there's no way this wallpaper will be all torn up and that there'd be gnawing marks on the on the four-poster bed that's nailed to the floor, and that there wouldn't be bars on the window. I mean, surely there had to be children there, right?
Yeah.
And she mentions them so many times.
Many times.
And it's so many more times than she mentions the actual physical baby that's in the house. That's hers. That is her child. So she is in all kinds of bad way. All right. Sorry, I kind of lost track of where we were going from there. But yeah, she even mentions something about the bloated curves and flourishes of the wallpaper, a kind of debased Romanesque with delirium tremens.
It's a fantastic fucking line.
So good. So good. And it's amazing. Go waddling up and down in isolated columns of fatuity. Fatuity.
I've heard it both ways.
I've heard it both ways. Okay, yeah, me too. All right. So yeah, it's a fantastic line, one of the best ones. Okay, so yeah, so here's another problem, and then we get roughly. This line is just soul crushing. It's just the last line of this little vignette where she's studying the wallpaper, and she says, "It makes me tired. Follow it. I will take a nap, I guess." And it's just, if you've ever been depressed, and I hope you haven't, but if you've ever suffered depression, you feel that. You're like, oh, God.
Fuck it. I'm going back to sleep.
I'm going back to sleep, and nothing else matters, and there's no point. So, oh gosh, it's awful. So then, after all of this time of talking about how much she wants to write, how much she thinks writing would help, then we get this, right? Remember that bit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
I don't know why I should write this. I don't want to. I don't feel able. And I know John would think it absurd, but I must say what I feel and think in some way. It is such a relief. But the effort is getting to be greater than the relief.
Yeah. And that comes right after that soul crushing line of "I'll take
and
a
that's
nap, I guess."
Once again, if you've ever suffered depression, that is 100% what that feels like. You know what would make you feel better. You know how much it would make you feel better. You know exactly what you have to do to feel better. But my fucking God, it's so much work to do it, even if that's just effort. Walking across the room and microwaving a cup of hot chocolate. Oh my God, it's going to take 3 years, it feels like, and every gram of energy you've got in your body.
Yep. John says, and I did want to touch on this a little bit. This is some more. So we already talked about the rest cure from the 19th century.
Yep.
Here's some other gobbledygook. And some woo for everybody. John says I mustn't lose my strength and has me take cod liver oil. Now, granted, there can be some benefits to taking cod liver oil. I used to take fish oil to lower my cholesterol. There is, that's a nutritional thing that could be a thing.
But it's not the miracle cure it was counted to be in Edwardian times.
No, and neither is cocaine or heroin, by the way, for depression. Damn it. No, not good for you. Okay, so don't do that. So I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So so he has her taking cod liver oil and lots of tonics and things, to say nothing of ale and wine and rare meat. So and then she says, "Dear John, he loves me very dearly and hates to have me sick." And she does. He talks about, or she describes him as talking about, how she's lost too much weight, and now she's starting to put some flesh back on her bones, and he's happy about that. So apparently she was so far gone that she wasn't eating, and so he's doing this, but plying her with 19th century tonics
and things
and ale and wine. I think all of those things together, we can probably agree would be a bad idea, especially when a 19th century tonic could be fucking anything. It could be laudanum for all we know.
Could
He might
literally be
he
anything.
might have been giving
Did
her
y'all-
laudanum.
There was a thing going around Twitter today that was a picture of an old timey cough syrup bottle label with the ingredients listed on it, and it was opium and cannabis and two other things.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd just throw anything at you back
Mhm.
then and say, "Here, it'll make you better." How do I
And-
know? I had some in stock.
And that leads to a statement. It is getting to be a great effort for me to think straight. Just this nervous weakness, I suppose. Or it could be all of that crap he's giving
Yeah.
you that we don't even know what's in it.
Couldn't
and
have
neither
anything
do
to do
you.
with the tonics and things
Now-
and the medicinal brandy and every other damn thing that
Yeah.
he's forcing down you.
Now, I really do want to stop for a second and take us out of the story and out of the 19th century and into the 21st by saying, you know, I have bipolar disorder and I have 2 anxiety disorders and I take meds for both of those. Take your meds, okay? We're not.
Yeah,
Take your meds.
because medicine has progressed a long way since the day of tonics and stuff.
It's advanced a lot. It's no longer tonics and things. Okay, so you know, please take your medicine. Okay, we've covered our asses there, I think.
Yeah.
All right, good. But I am serious about that because it took me a long time to get diagnosed, and it took me an even longer time to find a regimen that worked for me because every brain is different, and I'm so lucky that I did. I wouldn't be here now if I hadn't. So
Yeah,
I'm very
same.
grateful.
Literally.
Yeah. Yay. Okay. So yeah, he and then she says that John says she's his darling and his comfort and all he had, and that I must take care of myself for his sake and keep well. Well, that's great for fucking John.
Fucking John.
What about for her? Is she not supposed to? And it continues. So he says, "No one but myself can help me out of it, and I must use my will and self-control and not let my silly fancies run away with me."
Oh, my silly girlish
Like-
thoughts.
Don't be a silly, overreactive woman. It's fine. You'll be fine.
Yeah, Nerdy says, leeches, anyone?
Leeches.
Yeah, exactly.
Bloodletting. Yeah, absolutely. Arsenic. That happened a lot. That was in a lot of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Medicine. Also, and this is one moment when she does think of her child before herself. I think it's the only moment in the story when she does, honestly.
I think it
And
is.
she's in a bad place. So I'm trying not to fault her too much for that, but because the baby isn't neglected, it has care. If she was just like a woman alone and the baby was like in a corner, you know, being neglected completely, I'd have a whole lot more to say about that. But the baby is being cared for. We know that by its aunt. So the by his aunt, it's a boy, whatever. So the baby's okay. But she talks about those children again. Those children that must have lived here before, and she can't understand how they could have stood this room, and she totally understands why they would have hated it. And she said she's so grateful that say there's one comfort: the baby is well and happy and does not have to occupy this nursery with the horrid wallpaper. If we had not used it, that blessed child would have. What a fortunate escape! Why, I wouldn't have a child of mine, an impressionable little thing, live in such a room for worlds. So the room she's locked in right now, she would never allow her child to be in. And she ends that, John kept me here after all. I can stand it so much easier than a baby, you see. And again, that's one of those lines that just gives you fucking chills because it's so horrifying.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I am now we get to the bit where she's starting to be sneaky, right? So she's getting sneaky. She's starting to see more in the pattern in the wallpaper. She's discerned it's a woman. Did we say that already?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. She's discerned it's a woman. There are things in that paper that nobody knows but me or ever will. Behind that outside pattern, the dim shape Shapes get clearer every day. It is always the same shape, only very numerous. And it is like a woman stooping down and creeping about behind that pattern. I don't like it a bit. I wonder, I begin to think, I wish John would take me away from here. So at first she's afraid. She's afraid. She's seeing this creeping woman behind in the inner pattern outside within the outer pattern of the wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I try to do you want to tackle I tried to talk to John about my case, or should we just fly by it? I realized we're going a little slow. I didn't mean to. Till I felt creepy was the thing I wrote.
Yeah.
On 29.
There's a fairly lengthy sequence, lengthy by the standards of this story, which is rather short. Hey, Chris, welcome.
Hey.
Well, the first sentence of this chapter is, "It is so hard to talk with John about my case, because he is so wise, and because he loves me so."
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a nice healthy marriage, don't it? But I tried it last night. And then there's a lengthy sequence where she watches the moonlight go around the room. She watches the pattern in the wallpaper. She watches the figure try to shake the pattern just as if she wanted to get out. And then,
like bars,
for the first time, she interacts with the paper. I got up softly and went to feel and see if the paper did move. And when I came back, John was awake. And then the most condescending line
in the whole fucking story.
In literature. "What is it, little girl?" he said. "Don't go walking about like that. You'll get cold."
May I remind you, this is her goddamn husband, not her father. She's a grown-ass woman and a mother. And yeah.
And she says she doesn't think she's making any progress and says, "I think it's time to leave." And his instant reply is, "The lease will be up in 3 weeks, and I can't see how to leave before then. The repairs are not done at home, and I cannot possibly leave town just now. Of course, if you were in any danger, I could and would. But you really are better, dear, whether you can see it or not."
Yeah, and if you've read The Bell Jar, you're flashing on the same line I am right now. You may not realize it, but I can tell that you're better. Go ahead.
"I am a doctor, dear, and I know." He goes on to say she's gaining flesh and color. Her appetite is better. He feels better about her.
Hey.
She talks back to him for the first time that we know of. Says she hasn't gained weight. Her appetite may seem better in the evening when he's home, but it's worse in the morning. She's not eating anything all day. She's just eating in the evening to keep up appearances. And then the second most, or possibly first, we'd have to flip a coin, condescending line. "Bless her little heart," said he with a big hug. "She shall be as sick as she pleases."
As if she's doing all of this for attention, right? And specifically for his attention.
And then he continues to talk down to her for a while and insists that she's better. "Better in body, perhaps," I began, and stopped short, for he sat up straight and looked at me with such a stern, reproachful look that I could not say another word. And then he begins this, it's only a paragraph, but by the standards of this story, it's a fairly lengthy diatribe that essentially boils down to, don't let your imagination run away with you, kid.
Yeah.
"I beg of you, for my sake and for our child's sake, as well as for your own."
And again, there's that pecking order.
"Not to let the idea enter your mind." And just, even if you're not sane, act sane. You gotta keep it together for the sake of the family and the reputation. He doesn't actually ever say reputation, but my God, it oozes up through the cracks like the slime in the raft.
It does. And it reminds one, hi, I'm back. And it reminds one of those moments. I needed a refill and I didn't even ask if you wanted anything. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good.
You good?
Thank you.
Okay, sure. It reminds one of those moments in some black and white movies, if you've ever watched like some old school cinema, where a woman, gets emotional and the man in the scene slaps her, but it's not considered in the moment domestic abuse because it stops her from crying and she
pull yourself together, woman.
pull yourself together, kind of shit. And it's oh
yeah, Amiganet says, am I detecting a bit of gaslighting going on here?
Yeah, I think
Just
there's
a-
just a tad.
Just a smidgen, perhaps.
And we're talking about someone who is further and further, as we read, further and further removed from reality as it stands. This is the worst kind of gaslighting. Never gaslight someone who is going through a mental breakdown. Like she doesn't
Which
know.
at this point we know is what is going on.
At this point
At this point there are enough clues on the page that this person is legitimately losing their fucking mind.
Yeah, and she's even trying to advocate for herself here, but she's too...
And she has come out and said it.
Yeah.
Just now in this last section. She has come out and said, I may be getting better physically, but my mind is going and it's time to go home. This place is not helping and he won't have it.
He won't have it.
He will not have it. He won't bear the shame.
Because he's going to be
You can
right.
smell that coming under what he says. He can't deal with having a mad wife. Oh my God, can you imagine how my practice would suffer? I can't even keep my own wife's hysteria under control. How can I possibly be trusted with the welfare of others?
Right. Not to mention the fact, and that is a very good point, because she points out very early on that he and her brother are both physicians of standing.
Yeah.
So she can't go against what they say. And they've both come to the same conclusion about the treatment we were talking about. But honestly, at this point, he's just, it's almost like he just has to be right.
Oh,
he's like, no,
100%.
this rest cure will fix you. God damn it. Because I said it will.
Because it was my fucking idea.
And the thing is, it's making her worse. And it makes her worse. It continues to make her worse. And
it continues to make her worse exponentially. This is not a slow decline that we are witnessing.
Yeah, I lay there for hours trying to decide whether that front pattern and the back pattern really did move together or separately, is where she goes after that interaction with her husband. So, excuse me. This is great. And I'm just going to read this one tiny little bit, and then I really didn't mean to move on, but I love it so much. You think you have mastered it. Again, she's talking about the pattern on the wallpaper. You think you have mastered it, but just as you get well underway in following, it turns a back somersault, and there you are. It slaps you in the face, knocks you down, and tramples upon you. It is like a bad dream. And it just continues like that. I mean, to the point where you're picturing this stuff, and like in my head, it immediately goes to this hideous, like mustard yellow, floral and mushroom wallpaper that I saw as a kid from the 70s.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But she's speaking of, 19th century wallpaper, but there was some pretty, like, if you've ever viewed,
there were some Victorian / Edwardian interior design choices that were as bad as any ever made in the 70s.
I mean, some
1970s.
Yeah, I mean, some were breathtakingly gorgeous as well. I mean, sometimes more is more, and it's a good thing, but often less is more. And I think in this case, and certainly, we also know that she's obsessed, right? So who knows how bad this wallpaper really is? But it did. I mean, you get these images in your head, and you're just like, wow, that would drive me crazy too if I was stuck in that room. And she goes on to talk about the peculiarity of it and how it changes with the day, and in sunlight it's bad, in moonlight it's bad. And and then we get back again to at night in any kind of light, in twilight, candlelight, lamplight, and worst of all, by moonlight, it becomes bars. The outside pattern, I mean. And the woman behind it, as plain as can be. And this is when you realize, oh, fuck. She's seeing the main pattern now as bars. Remember, there was a gate at the top of the stairs. There are bars on the window, and now she's surrounded by bars, and the woman inside the wallpaper is inside. She's behind those bars, and very soon she's going to start to shake them. Sorry, it's the creepiest part, and it's horrible because you're watching the narrator's mental state deteriorate, but at the same time it's also really freaking cool. So and she talks about how by daylight the woman in the wallpaper is subdued and quiet. She's trying to be quiet. I lie down ever so much now. John says it is good for me and to sleep all I can, because apparently that's good, I guess. Good Lord. And then he tells her that she has to lay down for an hour after each meal. But she can't sleep. I mean, what grown person needs 3 naps a day? Right? I mean, unless you're ill or something. And if you're ill, yes, by all means, take 3 naps a day. But he's prescribing this to his wife, and again, you know, your spouse doesn't need to prescribe. They should know better. Okay. And then she talks about, again, guilt, her own guilt, and that cultivates. I'm sorry, guys, trying to speak. Cultivates deceit. For I don't tell them I'm awake. Oh no. And by them, she means John and her sister-in-law who check on her. She pretends to take these naps even though she's awake. And then one of the most chilling lines in the story immediately follows. The fact is, I am getting a little afraid of John. So, how did you find that line? Because that one always hits me every time.
Well, the cure obviously isn't working.
For sure. The cure is worse than the disease in this case.
As her mental state continues to deteriorate, and as it gets closer and closer to the end of vacation, and closer to fall, I think this Dr. Mitchell starts to loom larger and larger in her mind. The one that her friend had such a horrifying experience under.
That's a fair point.
And she keeps trying to get better and trying to get better.
Doing everything she's told.
And doing everything she's told. And
trying to.
You know, trying to nap according to the schedule handed down to her. You know, eating when she's supposed to, taking her tonics and things. You know, she's doing everything that's prescribed by her husband and her brother, who are in charge of her medical care for some 19th century reason.
Yeah.
And yet she doesn't get better, and her mental state, which she has been forbidden to mention,
she's not supposed to talk about it,
is getting demonstrably worse day by day, which means that her guilt is skyrocketing because she has been assured that if she just tries hard enough, she will get better. I mean, this is a very, very 19th century American perspective on health, physical and mental. That if you do right, if you follow your instructions and do what you're told and take your medicine
and keep
and follow your regimen and keep your head down, you will get better. And if you don't, well, anything that happens to you is your fault.
It's on you.
It's like, you know, poverty is a result of sin. Wealth is a result of righteousness. It's this whole constellation of 19th century bad ideas. And the weight of this is starting to press down on her more and more as she slides further and further into this horrible bout of postpartum psychosis. And as the deadline her spouse has imposed upon her before she is forced into Dr. Mitchell's treatment, looms, as that deadline looms closer and closer. It's no wonder she's not getting any better.
No,
her entire treatment plan is based on her doing stuff.
Or doing nothing.
And by stuff, I mean willing herself to get better.
Yeah, which doesn't work.
And that just doesn't work. It never has done. It never will do. That's not how mental illness works, John. You fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Dr. John, you fucking idiot. Excuse me. I should use your preferred honorific.
No, it's fun. It's fair. 19th century Dr. John, you know. All right. And I would say there's evidence for that, for your entire thesis there, that because she starts to not want to leave. Like initially, she wanted to get the hell out of there. The room was making it worse. The wallpaper was making it worse. She wants to get out, and then suddenly she doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And she's become so obsessed with the wallpaper because she's had fuck all else to do but pretend to nap and eat, and not be allowed to write except in the few moments that she's left alone. So yeah, so she's become obsessed with it. She's had nothing else to look at, and she starts to give it again this agency that does make it a character. In the story, she talks about how I've caught him several times looking at the paper, and Jenny too. I caught Jenny with her hand on it once. But what's interesting about this moment is that she tells us that Jenny didn't know she was in the room, and she asked her in a very quiet voice. I just realized there's no way the mic was going to pick that up. Sorry, guys. She asked her in a very quiet voice with the most restrained manner possible, right? Trying to sound the sane and cool. I'm cool. It's all good. I'm cool as possible. What she was doing with the paper, she turned around as if she had been caught stealing and looked quite angry and asked me why I should frighten her so. And then she goes on about how innocent her question was, and that the paper was stained around the edges, going like up to the headboard. I remember that as far as I could reach bit from earlier.
Yep.
And it stained around, and she doesn't know why. And she's like, and Jenny is like, hey, there's white smooches, or I'm sorry, yellow smooches on your clothes and on John's clothes. You're dang. You need to stop bumping up against
everything
paper.
It touches. It gets on everything it touches.
It gets on everything it touches. So and then suddenly,
which I'm sorry, real quick.
Yeah, please.
Isn't that how it's phrased?
Yeah.
Isn't it
so.
everything
Sort of,
it touches?
Yes.
Then she said that the paper stained everything it touched, which is another weird throwaway instance of giving the paper agency. It's not. The paper stains everything, you know, it stains all of your clothes when you touch it. It's this very sort of, I mean, it reads almost like a line from a Saki story, you know, that the paper itself has some kind of weird agency and that compels to be touched.
I'm glad it wasn't. But I almost wish it had been green, because in the Victorian
that
era,
would have taken us into weird Great God Pan territory.
Well, no,
we don't want that.
No, that's not where I was going. I just learned this. I was listening to a history program, and in the Victorian era, green dye for wallpaper was made with arsenic to set it, so people would and they put it in scrapbooks and then things like that. And if they did this. No, they'd end up So it would.
I'm glad it didn't go that way.
I'm glad it didn't, because it's
I'm glad
better.
it's just a straight up mental illness story and
Yeah.
not a dangers of household.
Yeah, not a
chemicals
dangers
story.
of household. Yeah, me too. Me too. Like I said, I'm glad, but part of me for a second thought, ooh, that'd be cool. But no, I'm glad also that it didn't go that way. So suddenly her mental state seems to turn around, right? Up until now, she's been sluggish. She's been sleeping a lot during the day. She can't sleep at night. She's got the woman shaking the bars in the wallpaper. Now life is much more exciting now than it used to be. You see, I have something more to expect, to look forward to watch. I really do eat better and am more quiet than I was. This is so fucking creepy. John is so pleased to see me improve. He laughed a little the other day and said I seemed to be flourishing in spite of my wallpaper. I turned it off with a laugh. I had no intention of telling him it was because of the wallpaper. He would make fun of me. He might even want to take me away. So that's why I say there was evidence to back your thesis that she really is terrified of going to this Dr. Mitchell. Here, Mitchell didn't. I don't want to leave now until I have found it out. There is a week more, and I think that will be enough. All right, now we're going to have to speed this up because we've already had these poor people going for over an hour and a half. Oh my gosh.
There's so much in the story, y'all.
There's so much. Okay, so
so much.
So that scent we were talking about earlier, that horrible smell once it starts raining, because it's late summer, early fall in England, and it's gonna rain, right? So there's a great line on page 41. She's talking about the smell and finding it's hanging over her, it's getting in her hair, and she said it used to disturb me at first. I thought seriously of burning the house to reach the smell. Now that is a batshit crazy line. That is a
that
huge red
accelerated
flag.
quickly.
It did. It's like you're all like, oh my gosh, she's so sad and she's hallucinating, and then oh hello arson. Okay, considering arson now. Arson does not actually happen as far as we know, but at this point we have a full-on halfway through, little more than halfway through. We have 2/3 of the way. We have a full-on unreliable narrator. At this point, we can't trust everything that she says from here on out because she's gone to the arson place, and that's scary. But now I'm used to it. Fine. Okay, it's a yellow smell. There you go. Did you want to?
No, I was just checking to see how far we were in.
Oh, we're about 10 pages away from the end. So really quickly, the pattern does move. The woman behind shakes it, but nobody could climb through that pattern. It strangles so. I think that is why it has so many heads. And this is where the women in the wallpaper start multiplying. It's not just the one woman moving anymore. They're multiplying. If their heads were covered or taken off, it would not be half so bad. So, and then I think the woman gets out in the daytime. And this is where it gets really fascinating because we don't know if she's talking about herself or if she's hallucinating the woman in the wallpaper who gets out in the daytime.
Yep.
Eventually, we know that she and the woman in the wallpaper are the same person, basically. We think. It's weird. What did you think about it? Okay, so
let's wait till we get to the end because I disagree with you.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. Well, and I'll tell you why privately. I've seen her. I can see her out of every one of my windows. It is the same woman I know, for she is always creeping, and most women do not creep by daylight. I see her in the long shaded lane. I said that would be important later. We're on page 44, creeping up and down. I see her in those dark grape arbors, creeping all around the garden. I see her on that long road under the trees, creeping along. And when a carriage comes, she hides under the blackberry vines. I don't blame her a bit. It must be very humiliating to be caught creeping in daylight. I always lock the door when I creep by daylight. What? What the fuck just happened? That is the next sentence. And you're like, what happened?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, it's weird that women shouldn't creep by daylight, but the narrator does apparently.
But only with the door locked. You don't want to be seen creeping about.
No.
By daylight.
By daylight. I can't do it at night, for I know John would suspect something at once. And John is so queer now that I don't want to irritate him. I wish he would take another room. Besides, I don't want anybody to get that woman out at night but myself. So they have been sleeping in the same room, and
Yeah,
now she's like,
I was
"Oh,
mistaken
it's okay."
earlier.
But now she's like, "I no, I need some space because I want to track down this hallucination, who is somehow can get free at night." Um, and yeah, and this is where we get. I heard I heard him ask Jenny a lot of professional questions about me. She gave him a very good. She had a very good report to give. There's a yeah, that's a loaded phrase if I ever heard one. She said I slept a good deal in the daytime. John knows I don't sleep very well at night. For all I am so quiet. For all I'm so quiet. She's like, I'm trying to be good here, and no one's noticing my effort. He asked me all sorts of questions too. Pretended. This is the first time she said this. Pretended to be very loving and kind, as if I couldn't see through him. Still, I don't wonder he acts so, sleeping under this paper for 3 months. So she's convinced that the wallpaper, how it's affecting her, is affecting everyone in the house. It's affecting Jenny with the thinking, looking like she stole something, and how it infects everything, and now it's affecting John. It interests her. She says it interests me, but I feel sure John and Jenny are secretly afflicted by it. And then we get to the last day, and there's that great bit there, which is not it's not to say the very end. It's almost the end. This is uh the oh shoot, sugar. What's the word before the denouement? This is the climax before the denouement. Yeah.
Hurrah! This is the last day, but it is enough. John is to stay in town overnight and won't be out until this evening. Jenny wanted to sleep with me, the sly thing, but I told her I should undoubtedly rest better for a night all alone. That was clever, for really I wasn't alone a bit. As soon as it was moonlight and that poor thing began to crawl and shake the pattern, I got up and ran to help her. I pulled and she shook. I shook and she pulled, and before morning we had peeled off yards of that paper, a strip about as high as my head and half around the room. And then when the sun came and that awful pattern began to laugh at me, I declared I would finish it tomorrow. Finish it today. We go away tomorrow, and they are moving all my furniture down again to leave things as they were before.
Yep. And so what do you think about that? Because early in the story, she talks about the paper being ripped off about as high as she could reach.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm starting to wonder, like, how long is this going on, really? Because
I think she's been crazier than she thinks for longer than she thinks she has.
I do too.
I think
concur.
I think that whatever it was that sent her on this rest cure was more extreme than some faux pas at a dinner party. And as soon as she got in there and saw that hateful wallpaper, she started taking it down without realizing she was doing it.
Yeah.
Because she very, very early in the story describes exactly the missing swatch of the wallpaper that she's just now explained and confessed to having torn down.
Yep.
And she doesn't think anyone's noticed until now, except that as soon as she did it, she was called out on it by Jenny. She just doesn't realize that it was that long ago. And at this point, we realize that she has lost all consciousness of the movement of time, and did as soon as she moved in here, if not before.
Yeah.
And the story that she's been writing, while true from her perspective, is so wildly estranged from how the world is actually moving and how time actually works that it's no wonder that the people around her are treating her like she's crazy, because she's acting crazy because she is crazy.
Yeah. And it is horrifically unfortunate. And it's my one true, absolutely true moment of sympathy for John is coming up. and it's in the denouement.
Yeah.
But and it because you know everything he knew was wrong, but it was what he knew, and it was common practice at the time. Rest cures were very common. Weird ass tonics and things that you didn't know really what was in them were very common, unfortunately. Um, okay, so and I quite enjoy the room. Now it is bare again. How those children did tear about here, and again, this I'm wondering what's happened to her child. 'Cause she mentioned John mentioning the baby like once and then hasn't since and then there's these phantom children that must have torn up this room, and I'm honestly I'm wondering if the baby lived or not. I really am at this point.
I think that's a valid question
We
at this
don't
point.
we don't know for sure. I don't know if there's a way from the text that we can know for sure, or maybe maybe if I knew more about like 19th century feminist code, maybe I'd have more insight. But yeah, it's bizarre. So she says the bedstead is fairly gnawed. I must get to work. I've locked the door and thrown the key down into the front path. And then she doesn't want to go out. She doesn't want to see anyone. She finds rope. Well, doesn't find. She's secreted rope away in the room to tie up the woman as soon as she frees her from the wallpaper. How weird is that? And then in the next moment, and she can't get the bed to move. Now she's mentioned before. Again, this is why this seems cyclical, and like this is something that's been going on longer than we think it has. She's mentioned before that the bed is nailed to the floor.
Mhm.
It can't be moved. But now she tries to move it. And because she's trying, if that woman does get out and tries to get away, I can tie her. She's got this rope. I tried to lift and push the bed, and but the bed until I was lame. And then I got so angry, I bit off a little piece at one corner, but hurt my teeth. And on the previous page, she
She
talks
was
about
talking about how
children.
badly the bed had been gnawed.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I agree. I think this has been going on for a lot longer than she realizes.
She's so crazy. She's literally chewing the scenery.
Yeah, it's horrifically sad. And I'm getting angry enough to do something desperate. To jump out of the window would be admirable exercise, but the bars are too strong even to try. Besides, I wouldn't do it. Of course not. I know well enough that a step like that is improper and might be misconstrued. Again, the diction is fucking brilliant. Yeah, misconstrued if you try to jump out a second or third story window. Yeah, that could be considered something improper.
It's obvious that she's not suicidal. She's just afraid of looking suicidal if she does something indecorous.
Yeah, there's some weird Madame Bovary shit going on here. I wonder if they all come out of that wall. Okay, here we go. Sorry. I don't like to look out of the windows even. There are so many of those creeping women, and they creep so fast. I wonder if they all came out of the wallpaper as I did. And you're like, as you did? Okay. Now she no longer has a background as a human being. The wallpaper released her or birthed her or something. That's where we are now. But I'm securely fastened now by my well hidden rope. You don't get me out in the road there. So now she's tied herself up in her own room. Mm-hmm. And it was, and while she was before was meaning to tie up the woman.
And so she did.
And she did.
She was planning.
She is the woman.
She was planning to tie up the woman once she got the woman out from behind the wallpaper, and now she has escaped from behind the wallpaper and gotten herself secured in the room.
Yep. And then it gets even weirder. I don't want to go outside. I won't, even if Jenny asks me to. For outside, you have to creep on the ground, and everything is green instead of yellow. So now green's the bad color, yellow is the good color. But here I can creep smoothly on the floor, and my shoulder just fits in the long smooch around the wall, so I cannot lose my way. So the discoloration she was complaining about earlier in the story was made by her own shoulder moving around the wall. And
Which explains the yellow stain on her clothing that Jenny was complaining about earlier, because she's been creeping about with her shoulder pressed against the wall for 3 fucking months.
As far as we know, maybe longer. And John's at the door, and he's crying for an axe. She tells him that she threw the key out the window. It's under a plantain leaf. She has to repeat this several times, which I'm sure sounded incredibly creepy to John. But he finally goes and actually looks and finds it, and it's there where she said it would be.
And we're coming up on one of the best last lines in literature, and I love it.
You know what? I'm gonna let you do it, because I think you should. So that's the bit before. I wasn't sure where you wanted to start.
So he goes and he gets the key finally, after having finally listened to something she said. He goes and gets the key and came in. He stopped short by the door. "What is the matter?" he cried. "For God's sake, what are you doing?" I kept on creeping just the same, but I looked at him over my shoulder. "I've got out at last," said I, "in spite of you and Jane, and I've pulled off most of the paper, so you can't put me back." Now, why should that man have fainted? But he did, and right across my path by the wall, so that I had to creep over him every time.
And that's how it ends. Woo! Miss Gilman, damn. That's as much of a fuck off to the patriarchy as I've ever read. Thank you for doing that last bit justice. It really is one of the greatest endings of all time of a short story. So yeah, she is she has in her mind, it's kind of like you guys know the film Brazil. You ever see Terry Gilliam's movie Brazil? Like the main character there, she kind of escapes in her own head. It makes her more crazy, which is horrific and bad, but she does escape, and he can't keep her locked up anymore because she's not playing by the same rules anymore. There's no society to consider. There's nothing to consider except, oh, I'm gonna have to creep over him now. Why on earth did he faint anyway?
He's in my way.
He's in my way. Exactly. And this is what I do now. So, woo, yeah. So horribly tragic story, but also an incredibly fascinating look into madness and into how it was mistreated in the 19th century, and I think also into gender dynamics in a very big way.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely no. Why would you want to get around it? But there's no getting around it. Yeah. So what do you guys think? Do you have any questions, comments? Did we bore you to death?
Oh, there's 5 people still here as we approach the top of the second hour.
Yay!
So 5 of you have stuck it out with us through the whole bloody thing, and we appreciate that greatly.
We do. We really do. Thank you.
This has been fun.
This is fun.
We should specifically thank Wonder Lady Fey for the suggestion. Yes. She told us that she wanted us to read and analyze a short story, and specifically wanted us to do it as a team. Yep. And we said, why not? We could do that. And then she suggested the yellow wallpaper, and I was like,
yeah. And
we can do that.
And then Wonder Lady Fey said, "Oh, that's perfect. Most people haven't read it." And I was like, "What? Oh, sorry, English major."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, I have 2 degrees. My degrees are in English, and so it's like everyone I know who was an English major with me in college has read the yellow wallpaper, but I forget that is not everyone's thing, and that's fine. We get so much done with math. Please don't take that as an insult if you haven't read it. But it's yeah, so one last time, you can find it free online. The Yellow Wallpaper. Google it if you need the author's name. It is her name is Charlotte Perkins Gilman. That's one L, and she was an American short story writer. This was published in 1892 in New England Magazine originally, and then later ended up in the Harvard Library. And she wrote a wonderful account of madness and how women were treated who suffered from any kind of mental illness in that at that time. Um, and particularly, again, I do want to point out, this is a story about an upper class woman and how she would have been treated.
Well,
This is the good.
yeah, this is if you're lucky, you got treated with this level of concern.
Yeah. I mean, like if you've ever read, oh fiddlesticks, what's that? My mom's favorite book. It's so depressing. It's the classic about the girl, and she goes to that horrible school, and her friend dies young because they make them like walk in circles in the rain.
It's the Magdalene sisters.
No, but that one it's like that. It's like that, except it's a Protestant school. Anyway, sorry guys. Basically, this is a mad woman in the attic story, but it's told from the point of view of the mad woman in the attic. So it's quite fascinating. The novel I was trying to come up with just then. If anybody knows it, please drop it. The title in the chat. It's a classic. Jane Eyre, for fuck's sake. It was Jane Eyre. There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Jane Eyre becomes the servant of this gentleman. There are weird noises in the house that she doesn't understand. She falls in love with him. He falls in love with her. And then it turns out that he has a first wife who lost her mind and is trapped in the attic. And then subsequently commits suicide or dies fatefully somehow. And he and Jane Eyre get married.
I was in grade school the last time I read that, so I don't remember the end of it.
It's worse. It's novel length depressing. This is nice short story, really, really modern, really good writing. And again, from the point of view of the protagonist who doesn't even get a name, and I think that was a conscious choice. I think if I could somehow, resurrect Charlotte Gilman right now and ask her, I think she would say my narrator was speaking for all mad women of a certain class. She was speaking for all women who struggled, whether it was postpartum depression or what have you. So yeah. And that would make sense for how generic the other names are, like Jenny and John. Those are like,
Jenny, John, Mary, no name given to the baby.
So, no name given to the baby. Such white people names, like the most generic white people names, right?
Paul says, you've been with me while I traveled home. He is now home, having a cup of English tea.
Nice.
Stuttering Chris was having honey tea with lime. That sounds delicious.
That sounds good.
Amiga Nuts actually found it freaking creepy. Quite freaking creepy.
I did too.
Because it was.
It was creepy. It's very creepy, dude. I had nightmares about this short story the first time I read it.
Oh, and Amiga Nuts was following along through the Gutenberg link. Says the hair on the back of my neck was tingling.
Right? Oh, mine too. And I got goosebumps more than once.
Oh,
and, And I've read this a few times, and it gets me. Some of those lines get me every time. There's no getting around. Sorry, I'm trying to not blow smoke right into your eyes.
Okay,
rude.
I appreciate that.
I love you.
I love you too.
Okay, so yeah, I'm glad that it was creepy and that you enjoyed it. I hope that's a good thing. Should we just wish them good night?
Yeah, I mean we're coming up on the top of the second hour, so unless we've got further questions or comments from the audience, we're probably going to wrap it here.
Yeah,
because this is going to take all night to process as is.
Yeah,
so.
we'll give it a couple seconds. If you guys have anything you want to ask,
got anything, you can throw it at us. We can. I've got my spare no expense second screen over here, so I can react on that in real time. If you got questions or comments, we can address those real quick.
Or if there are any requests for something else for us to talk about or do, we're cool with that.
Suggestions for a similar endeavor for another time.
Yeah.
We'd certainly be willing to take this approach with something else.
Okay. Paul has something. He says,
Paul says, when am I on next?
Yeah, when are you on
I am planning on doing another episode tomorrow. Probably tomorrow morning-ish my time. So let's see. I'm thinking like 10 or 11 my time, which would be 4 or 5 over there for you. You're 6 hours ahead of us. Is that right? You and Nerdy are?
I have no clue.
Stuttering Chris just clicked in a few minutes ago.
And didn't know what we were doing. Well, I'm so glad you like watching us talk, Chris. And as soon as it finishes processing, if you want
to watch anything you missed, it probably won't be available until tomorrow afternoon because these long live streams take forever to process and load. But,
yeah, they do. Sorry about that.
But yeah, it's
all right. And Paul said something else.
Can you do a chat show at some time, both of you?
Yeah.
I would love. He would love to come on a show with us.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, we could definitely
do that.
Especially now that thanks to Paul, we figured out how to reliably bring guests into the show.
Yay.
So.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, we can do that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That could be fun.
Yeah. And I mean, guys, just like email us or did we put our emails in the thing?
I think mine's in my description. It's real inventive. It's junkshoplibrary@gmail.com.
There you go. Do that.
So,
or you can email jklavoice, LAVOICE, @gmail.com. Either way, like if you want to set something up, we can do that. And
there's my Discord, there's Twitter, there's
I don't have a Discord.
Comments under videos. There's all kind of ways to get hold of us if you have ideas, suggestions, allegations, disputations, recommendations.
I like that.
What have you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to get out of this really uncomfortable chair now.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Or use Discord chat to arrange.
Yeah, we could do that too. Yeah, that always works. And of course, Twitter DMs when they're reliable.
Yeah, on days when they work fantastic.
Yeah, on days when they work, they're great.
All right. Well, I'm seeing buffering on my end, which probably means it's time to wrap. Yep. 2 hours, 1 minute, and 37 seconds. It's time to get out of here, y'all.
It's time to go. Thank you for listening to us talk about the yellow wallpaper. That was so much fun.
Thank you so much, everybody who came. Thank you, Faye, for the idea. Thank you, Paul and Amiga Nuts and Stuttering Chris.
Yes.
Everybody who came in along the way, Nerdy Rodents, Amiga Nuts, of course. Dave was here at the very beginning, but he had to go to bed.
Yeah, he probably had to go to bed. But thank you, Dave, for being here. If you see this later.
Yeah.
I may or may not be up for the quiz show tomorrow. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Everybody, take care. Be safe. Stand against hate.
Yeah. And remember, you can't find reason in wine, but you can. God damn it.
Is this a bit now?
It might be at this point. Okay. Hey, you won't find truth in wine, but you may find it in reason. There we go. Words. 2 English degrees. What the fuck? Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.